Well, Gary, it's great to be here with you having this discussion. This is an amazingly exciting time for our world and a very appropriate time for you to be writing and helping us better think through what's dramatically changed about how we leverage entrepreneurship for the good for our society. So thanks for joining us.
Johnathan, I'm honored to be here, and I love that word you just used of leveraging entrepreneurship. Like that's really what the work that you and I are doing are all about.
Absolutely. You know, you and I have over the years have always thought about entrepreneurship as being an imperative for society.
Yes.
We've often looked at it from a very wide perspective. We all know that entrepreneurs are important from an economic perspective. They, of course, create jobs and build economies. They're important for solving problems, and they're enormously important to our societies. But you've really narrowed down in this book and focused on really the value of the entrepreneurial mindset and the importance of this in all aspects, I think, of our life. One of the things I want to start with, if I can, is this notion that as we look to create thinkers in our society, whether or not they actually be people that do something like start a business or solve a problem, but the people who are going to be happier but also most productive as employees, for example, we need to be thinking about how they're approaching problem solving. Is that relevant to the entrepreneurial mindset?
It really is, Johnathan. It's a really good question to begin with. And here's what I've done, essentially. I've just been fascinated for 3 decades with this simple idea, like how do underdogs win? Mm-hmm. How does somebody who has nothing create something? And you quickly realize they're all entrepreneurial in some sense. And so I've spent, 2 decades traveling around the world interviewing hundreds of these everyday entrepreneurs. I'm not disparaging the high growth entrepreneurs. I'm just not interested in that aspect of it. So I want to understand how somebody takes a few hundred, maybe a few $1,000s. They're not inventing anything new. They're not necessarily charismatic or creative, but they're creating something out of nothing. And so what I've done is just started looking for the common and controllable factors, the underlying assumptions that are driving the behavior. And then I started to look at the motivation research to explain. And what I learned, Johnathan, is that non-entrepreneurial behavior is learned. That we're all born naturally creative, curious, growth-oriented. But that tendency can be easily stifled by a whole range of social and environmental situations.
So talk to me a little bit more about the motivational research. What other things did you learn as you dug deeper into motivational research? Because I think we sometimes see that it can drive people in an entrepreneurial direction because they like the idea of solving a problem, of doing it with others. Yep. And they're motivated because, in many respects, they're always giving back to the world. They're creating something new. They're not just taking away. But what else do we learn about? What else motivates us?
So that's a great question, man. One of the fundamental ideas that's in this new book is an idea called a self-determination theory. Deci and Ryan are the two psychologists that essentially brought us out of the dark ages of behaviorist thinking, of the B.F. Skinner, do this and you'll get that.
Yep.
Which has, as you know, become deeply embedded and remains deeply embedded in our systems of education and organizational thinking. Nevertheless, so what Deci and Ryan are saying, Johnathan, is that we're all self-actualizing organisms. Every living thing. We're all like acorns with the capacity and the desire to become all that we can become. What these guys are saying is that what we need is that there's 3 ingredients: autonomy, competency, and purpose. They call it relatedness, but purpose is an easier. If those 3 nutrients are available, human flourishing occurs. I believe that the entrepreneur unwittingly stumbles into that trifecta, right? But here's the problem. To the casual observer, the uninitiated, they look at the entrepreneur and they say, Johnathan's just passionate. He's just born that way. And that is, in social psychology, they call that the fundamental attribution error. I'm assigning your behavior to who you are, and I'm ignoring all of these factors. And you just alluded to it a moment ago. It's the compelling nature of the goal, the purpose-driven component in the goal that activates the intrinsic motivation.
So what are we doing to drive those positive personality traits that we think in a human being? I mean, obviously, some people may want to drive it because, like in our work, we're very focused on how do we have more people in society that are coming together, solving problems, forming teams, and in that creative exercise of iterating new solutions. Yeah. But in many respects, we want all of our citizens with this positive attitude. And if it's not an innate thing, what do we do to stimulate that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Johnathan. And I'll start with this. I think the greatest lever we can pull is education. And in my book, I describe something I call entrepreneurial discovery learning. And it's similar to problem-based learning, project-based learning, all these other terms that educators are familiar with. But the vector is, entrepreneurial discovery learning is about encouraging young people, starting in grade 5, to go out in the world and pursue their interests in ways that make them useful to other humans without the benefit of a predetermined path or a teacher guiding them through it. So we don't need to break down the whole system and start over. It's just introduce this idea of entrepreneurial discovery learning early and often in the margins. So that by the time a student arrives at university, they've started 3 or 4 businesses, they've failed a couple times, and they understand they're venture worthy, they understand bigger ideas, their entrepreneurial competencies have been elevated. What we're doing now, it's like, do we expect Lionel Messi to just walk off a farm somewhere at 22 years old to be a fully formed soccer star, ready for the major league? No. We cultivate that since he's 4 years old. And to your point, but when you understand the economic value of entrepreneurship, as you well do, let alone the developmental benefits in the human, why aren't we doing this? Baffling to me why this isn't included in the curriculum throughout.
It's very interesting. We sometimes, economists sometimes divide up different types of entrepreneurs, and they call them sometimes being referred to the local mom and pop store on the corner as being a passive entrepreneur. Fine. But I wonder whether that sort of terminology sort of in a way squashes the fact that whether or not you've got a dry cleaning store or a coffee shop, or whether you're trying to actually break a challenge and you're trying to actually innovate as an entrepreneur, in both of those instances, Gary, do they need the entrepreneurial mindset?
I think they do. And I define entrepreneurship very simply. And this took me a long time to come up with this definition. But I define entrepreneurship as the self-directed pursuit of opportunities to create value for others. And it's a very simple definition, but anyone can embrace it. You can take a young person in a minimum wage job, and you can embrace that idea that it's up to me to make myself as useful as possible in whatever situation I'm in.
Right. So by your definition, in a way, we're allowing the word entrepreneurial to become an adjective. We're allowing it to become a state of mind that doesn't necessarily have to be applied toward actually establishing a company.
That's our biggest challenge that we both share, is redefining entrepreneurship. And I say this in my book. First of all, the word entrepreneur arose at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, 1768, I think it was. It first appeared in a French dictionary. Because it was the first time in human history that we needed a word to distinguish between the person who organized and operates a business and the person who works in it.
Yep.
And I'm arguing in this book that that distinction is rapidly evaporating in front of our eyes. That the person who works in the business needs to think exactly the same way that the person that operates the business.
Yep. So that's a new way of thinking, because a lot of the time we used to say, I would talk to students at a graduation ceremony, and we were talking about entrepreneurship, and I would explain that, look, you may not be that disruptive entrepreneur with that amazing idea that's going to change the world, or even just a new way of doing something that's going to be popular in your community. But you may be the person that wants to work for them. And in fact, we used to give examples to say, every entrepreneur is still going to need someone who's got very plain thinking around accounting. We used to say, look, a team that starts a new company is going to require lots of different kinds of personalities. So expand a little bit on your last comment, that to some degree you're saying we all need in a company to have that kind of entrepreneurial mindset. Is that something in the past we've been overlooking then, maybe?
It is. And something I say in my book, Johnathan, is that the entrepreneurial mindset only seems enigmatic to you to the extent that you are steeped in managerial thinking. Mm-hmm. Right? And this is, so part of what I'm saying is that the mindset is to a person what culture is to a group.
Right.
It functions exactly. It's sort of our underlying operating system of which we're not really aware. And managerial values are important. And they used to be sufficient. So managerial values are focused on replication, efficiency, linearity, bottom line, right? Mm-hmm. And managerial paradigms are error-reducing paradigms. And they're important. I'm not disparaging that. But those paradigms are generally intolerant of exploration and experimentation and adaptation. And so where managerial thinking, whether you're an employee or at the top of the chain, doesn't really matter, that was once sufficient. Today, with the rate of change, we need both mindsets. And the key to survival is to understand which situation you are in so you know which mindset to apply. If all you have is a managerial mindset, all your problems are going to look like nails. Mm-hmm. Ronald Heifetz at mm-hmm. Harvard is where adaptive leadership, right? The greatest failure of leadership is to treat an adaptive challenge as if it were a technical problem.
Yeah.
The technical problem is the managerial mindset. The adaptive problem is the entrepreneurial.
Does this go on steroids in our new AI world?
I've learned so much being here at GEC, as I always do. These conversations are so important. And if I had to crystallize what I'm hearing here in the conversations around AI, is the big shift that's happening in the world is a shift from other-directedness to self-directedness. Mm-hmm. From extrinsic motivation, carrot and stick, do this and you'll get that, to intrinsic motivation.
Yep.
And if you don't get that shift, AI is going to flatten you like a bug.
Yep. AI, of course, is going to take away that driving factor also around much of what we do, particularly in entrepreneurship, but much of what we do has been influenced by place, by the location, by the physical element of what's going on, whether it be, the activities of people or the culture of the place in which that occurs. And one of the things I think we've seen articulated extensively in this conference is that it's going to some degree, once again, further democratize and further globalize this kind of thinking process to some people's unhappiness, because they'll take away a lot of the local characteristics of what it does when you're doing it real in 3D
Yeah.
in places. Now, because much of it exists in a digital concept, it can be anywhere. So you can look at that from the perspective of that opens an entirely new era of creativity and new models of an entrepreneurial mindset, because you're taking away even more limitations than the ones that you were just referencing that come with a top-down management approach to how we live and operate. What do you think about that? Do you think that to some degree we're going to see the entrepreneurial mindset even more important as we learn to navigate this extensive sort of use of, for example, regenerative AI or all of these new tools? Because people sometimes mix up AI with deeper technologies that are helping solve problems. But really, it's a massive transformation as to how we need to think and operate.
Yeah.
How does that work? Is that relevant to entrepreneurial mindset?
Well, it's very relevant, and I think it sort of adds to the beginning of our conversation about the entrepreneurial mindset imperative, right? So why are we still teaching kids in school to compete with AI? That's a fool's errand.
Yep.
And so, but let me get into a deeper point here about the importance of the entrepreneurial mindset. I think a lot of people overlook this. Let's go back to my definition of entrepreneurship. It's about the pursuit of opportunity, self-directed pursuit of opportunity to create value for others. The for others I'm emphasizing, okay?
Yep.
Now, the tip of the entrepreneurial mindset spear, if you can imagine such a thing, is empathy. It's understanding, as Clayton Christensen described, you have to look past the transactional, the functional dimension of human needs. And you have to dig deeper to the social and emotional dimensions of human needs.
Right.
AI can't do that. And
apparently not yet. But I agree with you. I'm just going to start with the assumption that AI can't do that.
Maybe at some point in the future it won't, but that's how, the title of my book is The Entrepreneurial Mindset Advantage,
Yep.
And it is that. If you can think like an entrepreneur, that gives you an advantage over someone who's still stuck in a managerial paradigm.
It's fantastic. Gary, one of the things I love about your book is that in entrepreneurship, certainly in the global entrepreneurial ecosystem, we invite people to join entrepreneurial communities. And we have something called Global Entrepreneurship Week, a week in November, where we have people who are already converted to the entrepreneurial mindset, organize activities and welcome ordinary citizens to come in. And I use the expression, kick the tires. The thing about what you're talking about, I think is so important, is that it once again gives another reason that if you take the time to come in to an entrepreneurial ecosystem, experience free some of the things going on and happening in a community, but then you decide, it's just not really for me. I'm not really ready to embark upon a new chapter in my life that would require me to leave my job to actually go and be part of a new business. They walk away from that with the most important asset, however, that they've spent time with people understanding the DNA of the mindset that is going to improve their lives in other ways.
Yeah.
So take this outside entrepreneurship. Help me articulate, what would the message be that you would give them? Look, you came into the community, you saw what they did at this startup weekend or something like that, and you experienced this and you thought it was very exciting, and you thought these are very positive people because they're all change makers and they look at the world as a glass half full.
Yeah.
What do they walk away with for the rest of their lives? They want to go back and they want to work in their existing life, but they don't want to become an entrepreneur. What's that entrepreneurial mindset exposure showed them or taught them?
Well, that's a really good question, Johnathan. I want to answer it in a couple of ways. And first of all, and I say this in talks and lectures specifically to young people, go to the job you have and show up 20 minutes early and stay 20 minutes late and watch how fast an opportunity will find you.
Yep.
Right? That's entrepreneurial thinking 101.
Right.
So, and to your broader point, I think we need to stop thinking about entrepreneurship in a binary way. You're either
Right.
going to be an entrepreneur or you're going to go down the employee path. Now this sounds crazy, but like I don't even think it's business.
Yep.
And by framing it as business, we're creating a bounded rationality that will never appeal to anything other than a very narrow sliver of a population.
Right.
Right? Now, let me go back to your question. To the individual you described, I've addressed this in my book. If you look at what a typical entrepreneur is doing, they are not taking big risks. They are not quitting their jobs.
Right.
They are not dropping out of school. So let's dispel some of those myths, right? What a typical entrepreneur does, well, here's what I'm advocating. Based on my observations of hundreds of everyday entrepreneurs, preserve the core, Jim Collins. And use some modicum of your discretionary time, thought, resources to experiment in the margins, to start tinkering with new ways to make yourself more useful to more humans.
Yep.
So, and I address this in the book. One of the big myths of entrepreneurship is the risk taker. They're risk takers. They're somehow inherently, a propensity for risk. I've not seen evidence for that. And look what Drucker wrote about that. Right? If we have anything in common, it's that we're risk averse. And the data supports that. Experienced entrepreneurs are more risk averse than non-entrepreneurs. If we have anything in common, it's that we learn how to de-risk situations through what I call micro-experimentation and adaptation, micro-failures. It's nature.
It's nature. And so in a way, hence the entrepreneurial mindset advantage is the very important word. I like that you've also articulated this as an imperative, similar to Carl Schramm, who wrote about the entrepreneurial imperative.
Yep.
I think the word imperative helps us to understand that this is extremely important, that we're active, and that it's important that we do this as a society. Gary, thank you so much indeed. Give me most important reason why people should pick up a copy of this book. You've obviously been thinking about the mindset for much of your life, and you've always been a great thinker in terms of helping us to translate that into all the applications we think are relevant. But final thought here from you about what you think is the most important reason someone should pick this up. What are they going to get out of this, and what's your number one message?
Johnathan, thanks for having this conversation with me. The subtitle of the book is The Hidden Logic That Unleashes Human Potential. And when you might pick that book up in a bookstore, that might sound like hyperbole, but when you read the book, you'll see that it is not. The entrepreneurial spirit is the human spirit. It's in everyone. It's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And there is a vast reservoir of untapped human potential that we cannot get to with the managerial mind.
Thank you very much indeed, Gary. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, and it's been great to have you here at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, and I'm particularly proud to say I came into your session to listen to you articulate this. There wasn't an empty chair. In fact, the walls were lined with people. So I think your message is resonating, and I think it's clearly important time for us to be thinking about this, as in a world that adopted design thinking and all sorts of other kinds of approaches to changing the way we solve problems and live our lives. This is a significant contribution. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you, Johnathan.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.